everybody. Raul here for Bass Musician Magazine, and today we have the great honor and pleasure of chatting with bassist, vocalist, guitar player, Bonnie Whitmore. Yay!
Hi! It's so good to be here.
My pleasure, Bonnie. We have been trying to get in touch, but you've been busy and I've been busy, and the planets finally have aligned, and now we have a chance to chat. But before we talk about current events, how did you get started in music and on bass?
Well, I had a musical family that I grew up with, and my dad, my sister, and my mom, we had a band called Daddy and the Divas, and I think the intention was to try to start me out on a different instrument. They tried to get me on fiddle first, and my sister, who is an incredible violinist and also like 5-ish years my senior. So I was like, I'm not competing with that. Like, she was too good. Mm-hmm. And I think it was kind of one of those things that my dad was like, well, I need a bass player, I think, next. So that was kind of like, here's your instrument, learn to play kind of thing. So, but I also played cello, and my mom was very classically oriented. And so I still had that kind of education, but kind of weirdly misfired, where I think the bass was more self-taught, whereas like the cello was much more like analytical with reading music. But it's weird because like I know where the note is on the cello, but if I looked at the note and knew which one to play on the bass, I would be guessing.
Gotcha. So you're entirely taught at home then?
For the most part. I think my dad taught me through numbers. Mm-hmm. And so, it was just like, it was kind of an interesting way to be introduced to music too, because a lot of the songs were cover songs, but they were my dad's versions of them. I wasn't going off of the original reference. And so there was quite the kerfuffle when I like realized we were doing Beatles songs, and being like, Annie, my dad was messing up the lyrics. I'm like, we can't have this, I really gravitated to it, even though it was something that was sort of, like, this is what you need to do. But the way that I think and the way that I play feels very natural on the bass. Like, that's just my home,
Gotcha. Well, and you're one of these unique individuals that can sing and play simultaneously. There's that right brain, left brain kind of thing that I do not have. And so it's admittedly I can do one or the other, but don't ask me to do both. Maybe I could get a chorus out somewhere, but other than that, not so much. But as we progress, you have quite a bit of solo work that you've done on your own, some albums. The one that we were going to talk about, Last Will and Testament, is mostly you. And then there's working with the Mastersons, which is your sister, Eleanor, and her husband, Chris. And so you guys are kind of in this cycle. You're in Texas, though. They're in New York, if I'm not mistaken.
They're actually in LA.
In LA, okay.
Yeah.
So kind of in different places. But
right.
Let's talk a little bit about Will and Testament. Tell us a little bit about that project.
That was kind of a sequel to a previous record, which, am I allowed to cuss on here?
Sure.
Okay, well, it's called Fuck with Sad Girls. So this was like, I didn't get nearly enough like pushback, and it was sort of touching on things that were personalized to me on that record, emboldened me, so to speak, to put out Last Will and Testament, which is more politically driven as far as the subject matter, but like my thought process was to start conversations, about hard topics, because that's kind of what I opened up the door with. Like, Fuck with Sad Girls was a song I wrote about having depression and the expectations that are put on, especially women, to not be that in order to be accepted in culture and that kind of thing. And so Last Will and Testament definitely opened up the door with, like, Time to Shoot was sort of me coming to the realization of like a couple of decades of dealing with mass shootings. I was in high school when Columbine happened, and so and I wrote the song soon after the
Parkland?
No, it was actually the one in Florida with the nightclub.
Oh,
and I'm blanking right now.
Yes, in Orlando.
Yeah, but I mean, it's like you could guess how many. Las Vegas, like there's been so many of them that it's just kind of like an ongoing thing. It was strange to me that we just had another one like this week, and it was really like a blip in the news cycle, which is just disheartening on so many levels. But we can all agree that we're divided right now, and we're not agreeing to the same sort of facts either. And as this pandemic has really like put a lot of things into the forefront, I needed to, my inspiration from writing for it was definitely coming from that place. And I've been sitting on these sort of political songs because, you war with yourself with being the artist and being the entertainer, and I wanted to try to get to talking about things that are important. And I feel like the best way to do that was asking questions. So a lot of the songs do that, like the right/wrong, ask who do you want to be, where do you want to go, what do you want to say? Like I'm really putting the listener in a position of answering me before I can continue on with the conversation, So we'll see what the next record really provides as far as the answer to that.
Well, but it's a bold position to take because it's not necessarily the popular one, but it's an important job that I think most musicians embrace, and that is by sharing kind of what's going on in themselves, allowing the listening public to identify with that, and or if not identify, maybe ask the question. Go, hey, wait, I haven't looked at this thing this way. And it can happen in a way that is, I'm going to say, non-invasive, because you don't have somebody yelling at you with a sign in front of you trying to tell you something. It is in a very subtle but firm way going, hey, you need to think about this issue. And if we look back historically, there's been, I always think when protest songs, I grew up in the 60s. I mean, if it was Joan Baez, Dylan, Creedence, a lot of these they were making statements that were not popular.
Yeah. And
it was after those times that people went, I agree with that. Why am I fighting in your Vietnam War? Why am I doing this? It kind of has to be said.
The Woody Guthrie quote is what I always go back to. It's like, our job as artists is to comfort the disturbed and disturb the comfortable. Like, I want to have conversation about something, and I can't ignore what's going on in front of me right now. I can't pretend it doesn't exist, and that's part of our problem, is that our inability to even start those conversations. We need to be talking about mental health. We need to be talking about self-care, along with the fact that we have a complete divide, and seeing that we have systematically created a divide, which this is where I could go deep into it as far as like, basically, it's patriarchy, white supremacy, colorism, so on and so forth. But but any of these things can be triggering to somebody too. Like, Ask For It is literally my pop song about rape culture. And I get the audience to participate with me on that song. I ask them to repeat back to me. And there's something about saying something out loud and being heard saying something out loud that gives you a different perspective too. So a lot of times people don't want to sing along with me by the end of the song, and I'm like, that's good, because a woman doesn't ask for that ever. Like, if we can agree to start there with the conversation versus still having this intersect of like not being able to see, we're all reacting to something instead of actually identifying what is the problem and how we're going to fix it.
Gotcha. Well, and it's a very bold stance, especially because you, in the genre that you're playing, it's a kind of interesting. And the lines get blurred when it comes to genre. You think back in the day, some things were a lot easier. You go, oh, this is country or this is bluegrass, and you're kind of in an alternative Americana,
folk funk,
but and with that, because there are nuances, I'll say, of kind of on the bluegrassy side and some of the country side, your messages may be heard by people that may get up in arms about them. And again, I think about, Dixie Chicks, when they took a stand on, an issue at hand, and it was, detrimental. And you kind of go, and they're still, I applaud them. We went to see them. I spoke to their bass player, as actually out of Austin, Glenn Fukunaga is where you are.
I've been a fan of Glenn for years. I saw him play with Terry Hendricks, who was like an idol of mine when I was a kid, and so like I'm lucky to call him a friend now. George Reef was another one that played with him too previously, and he was my bass guru. So like, but that being said, like the political leanings mixed with the melody line that sounds, that is very poppy. Like, you can talk about so many things in songs, especially when it's compelled through a melody. Like, you couldn't say them directly to somebody and be able to get the same reaction or the same emotional reaction.
Sure.
To it by creating it around something like I grew up with Disney and with Tom Petty and the Beatles, so like, you know, like Paul McCartney's bass lines, like it blew my mind. Yeah. I watched the Hulu thing, and like just the fact that he put the bass lines on last.
Yeah.
I was just like, oh wow. And how did you know to space that, to know, like, it explains a lot, but it's also like not the way that, you know, I guess I've approached recording as far as that goes. So it just puts it a whole other thought process into it that makes it very interesting.
Absolutely. So as we continue to move, we should talk about Ghost Stories. This is a project where you and your sister are on vocals.
We've been in, like, we've had a family band growing up. I've played bass on their last record as the Mastersons, because up until that point, George Reef was the bass player for those projects. And like Chris produced my first 2 records. So we're very immersed in each other creatively, but we've always been separate. And so Ghost Stories is the first time that my sister and I have like finally united together as this going forward, which is, I think, it feels sort of predestined in a lot of way, but it feels very the right thing to do now.
On multiple fronts, there's always this the vocal characteristics with siblings, with sisters. Your voices are so fabulously intertwined. They work so well together. Something that a lot of people have been doing lately to get a similar result is they are doing all of their own vocals themselves. And so, like Wolfgang Van Halen's recent album, he played all the instruments and he did all those vocals. And so, of course, the vocals are very harmonious together because the vocal quality is all him. But when you have siblings, your sister and yourself,
blood harmonies, man.
Oh man, I mean they're exquisite, and there's a lot.
Like it hits right here and right here at the same time, right?
Totally, and there's such a lovely use of minor keys, and again, people might misinterpret with Ghost Stories and go, what's it about? Is it morbid? Is it scary? But there's in the content and my issue. I listen to melodies and patterns. Those get me before lyrics. And I know there's some very fascinating and good lyrics there, but like the Greek tragedy, the minor keys and the changes and all that stuff just suck me right in. So tell me a little more about the whole project. I'm just really excited about it.
Well, we wrote a lot of the things together. So that, and I think because Eleanor and I also come from the same background, we have a lot of the same influences, so we can kind of embellish on them. Like the string arrangements and the lushness of that is really getting to shine through. I mean, it's always been present on the Mastersons too, but that's like full on my sister and our upbringing and what she does specifically, but balanced with a bouncy pop bass line usually behind it. Plus, we have Chris Masterson is producing it, so we're still getting all of those influences into the production of it, which is even great. A few of the songs, like one of the Sissy and Porter, I wrote with Bonnie Montgomery, but just being able to get the accordion, I don't know. I love being able to approach every song with like what the song is calling for too, you know, and it's fun to see how it all kind of ties in together. It was nice to work with a producer again, because my last 2 records have been self-produced with me and Scott Davis.
And it has a whole lot of very interesting things. It's going to be available, I guess, in January. Is it when it gets released?
January 21st is the release date. Yeah.
Very cool. Well, for people that can hear about this now, they have something to look forward to, and I definitely encourage them to give it a listen, because it has so many. Again, the violin work, I heard, I'm sure that's your sister playing, and with the 2 of you together, it is just.
Well, it's the classical influences that we have too, along with my dad's like folk influence is really hardcore at it, and so like I mean, that Learn to Fly is kind of like a song for my dad and our growing up with flying airplanes and all that kind of stuff. So I wanted to have the melody reflect like that sort of feeling or what you almost, the sounds that you make when you do a loop, you know?
Yeah.
It's just wanting to take that tapestry. And then like Superficial World of Love, you know, I was like 2 or 3 and seeing her do Traviata, you know, like we were taken to operas all the time as a kid, so we have that very dramatic and dynamic sort of aspects always going into our songs. But as far as like the content and storyline, it is about grief more than anything else. So it's the sharing of the ghost stories. Some of these are literal people that we lost, like Sissy and Porter. That was written about Chris Porter, who was a very good friend of mine and Eleanor and Chris, and George Reef also makes an appearance. There's a lot of people that we've lost, and I think a lot of people have been dealing with that too, either through the pandemic or previously. I mean, 2016, we lost so many of our heroes. So I think that's just something culturally we're very much processing that, you know, processing that grief. And so it can be scary for some people along those lines, but it's just more about having the courage to get through it and to share the stories of our loved ones, because then they live on with us, you know?
Absolutely. Well, and this would be a good moment to talk about also how you're getting your sound when it comes to the bass. What are you playing on?
Typically, I use, I believe it's a 76. I got it at Rockin' Robin's in Houston, which was awesome. It's an Electra knockoff. It was a lawsuit series that looks just like an EV3 Gibson. And it's got the slotted headstock on it, which is another reason why I never replaced the strings, because it's a pain. But it is short scale, but it's not as short. It's right in between, which is kind of nice, and the neck is really thin, which I love playing that for that. And then my other kind of weird one that's more when I'm doing my solo stuff, but I got a hold of an 8-string Hagstrom a couple years ago. Nice. And have been having a lot of fun messing around with that one. And that one I'm usually using like a full drive pedal, or I have this bass fuzz pedal that I love. It's a company out of Alabama called a Centauri Sonics.
Okay.
But it's a custom like bass fuzz. So what I love about it, because I feel like even the big muff and everything, it cuts the low end too much, which the clarity of the note is never all that important to me. It's more of like the fatness and the feel of it that I really am always going for. So I love the fuzz, but I want it to rattle, you know?
Yeah. Very cool. And seeing that it's been a long time since you've changed your strings, do you remember what strings they are, what kind they are?
I believe they're flat wounds. Okay. Typically is what I use. I don't actually, that's not true of the Hagstrom. I use steel strings for that one, mostly because I play it with a pick and I want it to be more twangy. It's so jangly with that octave string on it, so it's just really fun to just almost chord, and especially as a power trio, which is what I love to play as. Like, it just gives a little bit extra chime that makes it fun for me. But the Electra, and I also have the Jack Cassidy reissue Epiphone Gold Top.
Nice.
I keep flat wounds on those, and I think they're Diodario.
And amplification-wise, do you have any preferences?
I've kind of flipped back and forth a little bit. Right now, I just use the Fender Rumble, which I know is like so stock, but it has the low end that I always want. It has enough of it on there for like their 12-inch or 15-inch. I'm not usually playing huge stages, so I mean, I used to have a Laney that was like 215. my dad rigged it with like lawnmower wheels, so I could actually get it around. But that I love the Fender Rumble just because it's like so lightweight. Like I love the expression on anybody who tries to, you know, offer to help me, and I'm like, yeah, take the amp or whatever, and they're like, really? Like, give me the heavy thing? And then they go pick it up, and it's like, woo!
It's not bad, yeah.
But I have like a Mesa Boogie 15 as well with a Galleon Kruger.
An area that often gets overlooked, instrument cables. Do you have a preference in instrument cables?
Well, I don't have an endorsement with Diodario, but my sister and brother-in-law do, so I do use a lot of Diodario products, and I actually genuinely love the Planet Wave capos and their lines. Like both of them, they last for a really long time. They also make the 90-degree angle ones. So, and as much as I love the old timey like cord one, it's like a corded phone.
Yeah, the telephone cord. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that one, but I just stay with the Dreamline Planet Waves, and I love it. The extra little turn that they have. They also have like a separate head on the 90-degree angle ones. I'm sure I sound so smart by saying this, but it's easy to access. So if you can solder it, then it's just a little bit easier to fix and get into it.
Durability and repairability are important things, especially when you're on the road, and
right.
The cables will take a beating. But as we move, any other items in your toolbox to get your sound as far as the bass goes?
I will also use a carbon copy with it, pedal, for a little extra delay. But I think I've been slow to getting into the gear side of life. I think also just because of like the little lady thing that I've experienced when I was much younger. I was really grateful for George Reef, honestly, because he sort of heard my plight and wanted to help me out when I was really wanting to move to Nashville and really pursue being a side person. He just sort of invited me over, and he had like 30 different basses to pick from, and he's like dialed me in on his little GK amp, and I just went to town playing all of them to figure out which one I really loved, and I found that I have very expensive taste.
Yeah.
Which is okay. I don't usually play it live, but a Hofner bass is also still one of my all-time favorites, just for how thumpy they can be, and a lot of times I'll have like Unfortunately, I bought the Electro with one of those pull-out mutes on it, but one of the posts broke, so I had to take it off, and I haven't gotten a new part for it. But just being able to put a little foam underneath it, especially recording, that's always been either piano foam, depending on how the bridge is set up, or just a little piece of fluff.
There you go. Well, a lot of times, I think it's one of the driving forces behind gear acquisition syndrome, which many bassists have. And that is searching for that bass that feels just perfect to them and works just right for them and has the sound they're looking for. And that's why before all is said and done, they have more basses than room in their house, and they have to build a separate room outside. So if you can kind of identify the traits that you're looking for, I mean, it can be weight, it can be the shape of the neck, it can be the length of the neck, fill in the blanks to all the things that you like particularly, then you can come up with something that you just love. And then once you do, you get so attached to that. And I've spoken to so many players that have instruments that they've had forever, and they're grungy and beat up, but they love them. That is the one, so.
Well, I think like my approach has always been more punk rock. Like I just sort of like go, plug in, move knobs, like sound, very primitive. And so to have somebody who has the experience and wisdom like George to just sort of be like, okay, let's dial this in. What is it you're actually like? And that was just so great to just like go down the line and try the Rickenbacker and try the P bass and try the Hofner and he actually had the Gibson bass that the Electro is based off of. It's like the same year, except for mine was a lot more affordable.
Yeah. Well, again, there is a world of knockoffs and Fender-like objects and Gibson-like objects, and so it's a whole rabbit hole. But we should move out of gear. Okay. Looking ahead, we know the album is going to drop in January. What other plans do you have for the future?
Well, Eleanor and Chris and the Mastersons were all touring Europe together right at the end of January into February. That was supposed to happen pre-pandemic, and so now that's finally gotten rescheduled, and fingers are still crossed it's all going to happen. And then we're going to be doing the Outlaw Cruise right after that.
Nice.
And so that's like the Whitmore sisters. We're a very complicated bill right now because it's like 3 different sets of music.
Sure.
So it's like the Mastersons with Bonnie Whitmore featuring the Whitmore sisters, or vice versa. It's a lot, but we're just having so much different creation, and that's like a beautiful thing to be able to present into the world. And I see no need to conform to one particular thing either. So that's the main thing, is we'll be out doing that for all of next year with the release of the Whitmore sisters, and that's going to be really fun. And probably there'll be another Bonnie Whitmore record in the Sad Girls, and probably another Mastersons record after that, and so on and so forth. I just actually finished a record with John Moreland. His last record came out right before the pandemic, and I played on that one, and then we went back and made a new one. So I think he's got that scheduled to come out next summer, which is also cool. So
very nice.
Lots of creating happening, which is great.
Excellent. And if people want to know what you're up to, where's the best place for them to look?
BonnieWhitmore.com and thewhitmoresisters.com. Those are great ways of finding, but I'm very Googleable. If you put Bonnie Whitmore in there with an IE, then, I pop up. I populate, thankfully. But I'm on Instagram and Facebook and all of that, all of which is the Whitmore sisters or Bonnie Whitmore. So, yeah.
Very nice. Well, Bonnie, we appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule, to
so
chat with us.
Finally happened.
Oh, it was long overdue, but it's all good. So again, thank you so much, folks. You've seen her here, Bonnie Whitmore, coming to you on Bass Musician Magazine.